I want to address some of the issues that Neil Tyson brings up in his ideas about God.
Do you believe in God?
Me?
Creator?
Yeah, so I'm...
He has used this argument several times, which is why I went to this video. I've heard him say the things he's about to say on a couple different occasions. Now, the first thing I want you to note is this sign right here is the sun, and the very first worshippers, the very first pagan worshippers, worshipped the sun. And as time went on, the sun became a symbol for the illuminated, the enlightened. So this sign is a symbol of people who believe they are enlightened. And if you look at his shirt, or I'm sorry, his vest, you'll see the sun once again, the sun once again, and of course, the five-pointed star. Now, if you look up here, you will see a model of Saturn. Now, later on, he brings up the god of Saturn, and I'll point that out when he does. So this scene right here is set for you to already know that the people given it are enlightened. The people presenting this to you are enlightened, and they do not worship a god or any sort of being.
The more I look at the universe, just the less convinced I am.
Now, they just discovered last week, and this is the second week in February, 2018, they just figured out last week there could be 1 trillion planets beyond our galaxy. 1 trillion planets. So, the more he looks at the universe, he could not possibly look at 1 trillion planets to come up with any sort of serious conclusion. So he's real short here in his idea of his conclusions and the evidence that he has to base his conclusions on.
That there is something benevolent going on. So if
Notice how he switches from something benevolent to getting excited, because this is where he goes into his rote, R-O-T-E, his by-the-book speech that he has said on several occasions that I've seen him present this idea.
If your concept of a creator is someone who's all-powerful and all good, that's not an uncommon pairing.
Right here is where he bashes Christians. It's not an uncommon pairing, meaning this is what they believe. This is what other people believe. When, in reality, the Christian faith has a number of different views within the Christian faith. There's a whole bunch of ideas in Christianity, and certainly not all of them can be summed up as Christians believing that God is all good.
Powers that you might ascribe to a creator. All powerful and all good.
Once again, all powerful and all good. This is a general summation that is not reflective of people's viewpoint on Christianity. It's a summation of his viewpoint on what he thinks their viewpoint is.
And I look at disasters that afflict Earth and life on Earth. Volcanoes, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes.
I'm taking it that Mr. Tyson has never actually read the Bible, because in the Bible, the deity in the Bible causes earthquakes that swallow people up. He causes destruction. He causes a giant flood that wipes out everybody on the planet, basically. So I'm not exactly sure where he can separate, or how he can separate the idea of a natural disaster not being part of the God that he wants to describe here. Once again, I attribute it to the fact that Mr. Tyson has probably never read the Bible.
Disease, pestilence, congenital birth defects. You look.
Pestilence is actually one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And guess who sent the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse? That's right, Neil. According to John, God sent them. So God can send pestilence down on the planet. Now,
Congenital birth defects.
in terms of birth defects, Mr. Tyson is implying that they're all bad. They're all suffering. They're all horrible. When if you go ask people who may have a special needs child, they may think that child is a gift. They may think that child is part of their test, part of their journey with their God that gave them that child, or that helped give them that child. So for him to say that congenital birth defects lead to misery and suffering is once again a false statement.
You look at this list of ways that life is made miserable.
See, he claims that that makes life miserable. When I know many Christians who look at their supposed suffering, or their trials as they put it, their tribulations as they put it, as part of their testament to God, as part of their journey with their God, as part of their life that they accept and then they deal with. And from that, they find rewards, they find love, they find compassion, they find empathy, they find things that are not just suffering. And of course they suffer, of course they feel sad, of course they feel anguish. We all do as humans. But to categorize every single person who has a trial with who they consider to be their creator as suffering, I'm sorry, from my experience, that is just not true.
On earth by natural causes.
And once again, he attributes them to natural causes.
I just ask, how do you deal with that?
Well, they deal with it by understanding. They deal with it by using compassion. They deal with it by using empathy. They deal with it by showing true humanity in the face of adversity, Mr. Tyson.
So philosophers rose up and said,
this is a false statement. This is a broad generalization to categorize everybody who philosophizes into one group being philosophers. Mr. Tyson, this cannot work in an actual argument or debate, because you must specifically name the philosopher who's coming up with this idea. All philosophers do not have the same idea, and all philosophers cannot present the same idea by the very nature of them being individuals. When scientists and the scientific community all have the same evidence, oftentimes they will have several different conclusions. So it's impossible to say, scientists say this. Well, you can physically say it, but it's not true. This is called a broad generalization. And this is a false statement that follows his broad generalization.
If there is a God, God is either not all powerful or not all good. I have no problems if, as we probe the origins of things, we bump up into the bearded man.
Now, this is where he brings in the Saturnalian cult, the cult that worships Saturn. The god of Saturn is Kronos. Kronos is the god of time. When time runs out, you are dead. How does Father Time get pictured? With a beard, with a long white beard. That's Father Time because that is Kronos. That is how Kronos was pictured. Now this was adopted by artists and by people who were attempting to draw a picture of God that believed in Kronos and Saturn. So it's no coincidence that Mr. Tyson has a globe of Saturn, a model of Saturn behind him, because he believes God is a bearded man. Well, Mr. Tyson, early Hebrews that believed in the existence of their God would not even speak his name. They would not dare draw a picture of this God because they knew that they could not know what he looked like. They would not even speak his name. They would not even write his name. So to forward that all people that all people think of God as a white man with a beard, that is a later addition to Christianity that was influenced by a Saturnalian cult using the god Kronos as their model.
That shows up, we're good to go.
So if Mr. Tyson doesn't see a bearded figure, then he can't believe in God.
Okay? Not a problem. There's just no evidence of it.
Well, actually, Neil, there's a bunch of evidence that God exists. I'm right here, buddy. You want to come shake my hand and tell me God doesn't exist? I'll be more than happy to debate you on the subject. You want to go down to the ocean and tell me God doesn't exist? You want to look up at the stars and tell me God is not all around you? This is like Wi-Fi. Think about God's signal, the source signal, as a Wi-Fi signal. Mr. Tyson's computer can't pick up the Wi-Fi signal. Everybody else in Starbucks that he's in is sitting there on the open network of Starbucks Wi-Fi, getting on their computer and getting online through that Wi-Fi. But guess what? Mr. Tyson's computer is not connecting to the Wi-Fi, so he doesn't get the signal. Therefore, it doesn't exist. Well, I gotta tell you this, Mr. Tyson. Wrong answer, buddy.
And this is why religions are called faiths, collectively. Because you believe something in the absence of evidence.
Some people use the word faiths to describe religion. That does not mean that every single Christian church describes itself as a faith. Faith can be a vehicle for getting in touch with something that you may not understand. Your physical mind, your logical mind may not be able to understand the idea of something that is so vast, so great, so huge that it could create the universe? How can your mind comprehend that, Mr. Tyson? It cannot, as you have proven. So people use a vehicle of faith, and faith is not based upon blind ignorance. Faith is not based upon blindness. Faith is based on some sort of feeling, some sort of deeper understanding, some sort of connection that cannot be put into words. And the only way that somebody can put it into words is by using the word faith.
That's what it is. That's why it's called faith. Otherwise, we would call all religions evidence.
Well, Mr. Tyson, you have never found evidence that you can actually do anything in this world. If you look at science, they have never created anything. Mr. Tyson, all his colleagues, everybody, I want the best scientists on the planet to show up. I want to show up at their lab. I want him there, and I want all of his buddies there. I want the best PhDs on the planet there. And when they get there, I'm going to show up with one bottle filled with hydrogen molecules and one bottle filled with oxygen molecules. Even the most basic young student knows that water is H2O. That's what it is. That's the evidence we have, that it's 2-part hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. Right, Mr. Tyson? That's the evidence. So I'm going to show up with your evidence, hydrogen in one bottle and oxygen in the other. Now, I want you, Mr. Tyson, and I want your colleagues, and I want your machines, and I want your most sophisticated machines, your most expensive machines, your highest ranking scientists to make me water. That's all. You know the formula, right? You got the formula down, right? It's H2O. Everybody knows that. That's the evidence. No faith needed. Now make me water. They can't do it. They've never done it, and they never will be able to do it. And if they did, what would they tell you that makes them? Well, that makes them God. So even in their own vernacular, they have to use a word describing a power that is beyond them, while it's simultaneously denying it.
But we don't, for exactly that reason. So I'm given what everyone describes.
First of all, everyone doesn't describe it in the same way. Everyone does not describe their relationship with God in the same way. So he is once again using his idea that he believes how everyone he has heard describing it describes God.
To be the properties that would be expressed by an all-powerful being in the gods that they worship. I look for that.
And once again, he says gods instead of an all-powerful God.
That in the universe, and I don't find it.
Now, once again, he will never find it because his machines can't read it. His machines are built on the physical plane to read physical objects. Let me give you an example. If I show up in the most sophisticated laboratory, I'll leave my hydrogen and oxygen behind this time. But when I show up there, I'm just going to show up with my thoughts. That's all. Just a simple thought of a dog. I'm going to show up in his laboratory with the most simplest thought in the world, a dog. There is proof and there is evidence that dogs exist. So he cannot deny the existence of a dog. And I will sit in a chair and I will have them hook up with machines and I will think of a specific type of dog and I want their machine to read it. I want their machine to read my thought. I want Mr. Tyson to be at the helm of the machine to read my thought, what I am picturing in my head. Just picture a screen. Could that screen produce the picture that I'm picturing in my head? The answer is obviously no. So if these people, Mr. Tyson, his colleagues, everyone who's calling themselves a scientist that's living off of evidence, cannot even read what I'm thinking in the simplest form, how can he read God? How can he read a being that's so powerful it could have created the universe? How could he read a force that's so huge that could make earthquakes? How could he read it? He cannot. So he will never find evidence of God through his machines.
So I remain unconvinced.
That's good. I'm glad, because God doesn't need you to be convinced, Mr. Tyson, of anything.
But if you got some good evidence, bring it. Bring it. Bring it.
I got it, Mr. Tyson. It's all around you. God is permeating you, Mr. Tyson. God is permeating everything around you. I'll go back to my Wi-Fi. Just like a Wi-Fi signal is permeating your computer, but you might not be able to get on the network because you don't have the security key, or your computer is not reading the network correctly, then does the Wi-Fi not exist? You can't see that signal either, can you, Mr. Tyson? But you can read that with your machine because you created that wave. You created that Wi-Fi signal with the machine. So of course your machine can read it. So guess what? If God created humanity and God created the world, and some force, some source field came into existence to make us, you will never be able to read it with your machines. You will never find evidence through your machines. You will find it through yourself. You will find it through you being part of that creation. You will find it through understanding your place, through understanding what you are, through understanding the part of God that is in you.
Okay? And so I don't lead with that information, because what I believe should be irrelevant to anyone. It's not about me.
Here he's trying to belittle your individuality, to get you to groupthink. Oh no, we all believe in evidence. We believe that. No, this is disempowering. I'm here to tell you, it is about you. You are the most important thing in the world to humanity. You may not be important to a deer, you may not be important to a turtle, but you are important to us. You contribute to us by living, by hearing my voice, by being here. You are important. You are valued. You are capable of everything that any human is capable of. You are humanity. You are important.
It's about the real world.
The real world is subjective to how he's describing it to himself. He means the world as I see it as a scientist, and that is the real world, and the real world doesn't contain a God. Well, Mr. Tyson, your real world doesn't contain a God, which I am fine with. Like I said, if there is a being, if there is a deity, if there is a source field, it doesn't need your approval. It doesn't need your recognition. It doesn't need you to find it. Okay? But you do, Mr. Tyson. You do. And if you can't, that doesn't mean that it does not exist.